Good evening, everybody. It is January 28th, 2025. Yes, so it's just after midnight. So now we change dates. This beautiful little cat oil painting is done by Linda McIntosh, Jungle Art, and I've got a testimony for you guys. Please remember to hit the thumbs up. It helps the channel grow, get the message out there. So here we go. Targeted female, a no name, and wants to remain anonymous, age 50, and this is in the Midwest. So here we go. I was targeted before I was born. My father was targeted too, as was my family before I came along. My father was a cop, then an attorney, and eventually a judge. They did the most corrupt things to him, and eventually he quit and wanted nothing to do with their corrupt system. I was poisoned and almost left for dead in an obscure quote-unquote hospital when I was 10 years old. The teammate that did this is part of the demon network. They call themselves quote-unquote elite, and you know what I call them. I call them deletes. It appears to be a network that stands to gain financially and spiritually off of our misery. They killed my baby sister at age 6. How about that? 6 years old. You want to know why? Because right before age 7, it's all about Saturn. It's all about Saturn. So they killed my baby sister at age 6 months through obvious medical neglect. They killed my grandfather, who was a priest, after he refused to rat on a parishioner. He was approached by them, allegedly some government snitches. They approached my mom to become a government snitch, and when she refused, she was fired. And that was all while she was pregnant with me. Well, that is really interesting. I'll just tell you that happened to my mother also. When my mother was pregnant with me, she was fired. I was targeted by my college athletic director, also a Mason, and placed in this program when I came to the States. My targeting started increasing to the point where I was kidnapped after a tournament and invited to a quote-unquote party that was, in hindsight, an obvious female trafficking den. I was lucky to escape with my life. My cars started breaking down. EMF started in my dorm room. The coach started abusing me verbally every chance she got. Teammates started acting strange. I was poisoned one night in my dorm room while everyone was away for Thanksgiving break. My bike was stolen, and other events that people have described as gang stalking. My father suffered multiple heart attacks. My brother was assaulted in school, and looking back, these were gang stalking events that I didn't back then put together. I graduated. I started my first job, and now looking back, they started to increase the targeting at work. I had a good career for a few years, and then I started medical school. I was left alone for a few years, although looking back, my equipment was always somehow breaking down when no one else's did. I graduated with multiple honors, and once I started working, I had a good career start. Until I took this one job and my boss was just plain evil and eventually introduced me to my ex, and he was the devil himself. He was a classic malignant psychopath that told me, quote, "If you don't kill yourself, I will do it for you. I want your money and the kids." Isn't that amazing? And this is exactly like the article I posted. Actually, the article is from a year ago, that 2-minute video that I showed you guys about the husband who was targeting the wife. He said those same words. What is this, a script? He says, "I want your money and the kids." Enters the woman that in my childhood tried to poison me to death. Imagine all these years later. After her visit, I started hearing nefarious things in my house. My dog was always somehow set loose at night and eventually poisoned to death. I heard whispers telling me to unalive my baby shortly after birth. The church staff started acting strange, trying to persuade me to go back to my ex that tried to strangle me while I was breastfeeding my baby and threatened to unalive my baby in his sleep. Enter a firefighter I met. Things really picked up at that point. The break-ins, shadow people, strange events in my home. A perfectly healthy, huge pine tree in my quote-unquote neighborhood watch neighbor insisted on cutting, eventually broke one night and almost crushed me in my sleep. My neighbors were as follows: Mason, 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 Army, firefighter, and they all work for the courthouse. One reported to my ex 6 times a day. There's that number 6. 6 times a day as to my comings and goings. I saw it on the phone bill. My ex's new best friend worked for the courthouse and confessed years later that he taught my ex how to plant cameras and spy on me. My mail was always stolen, so I would miss court dates. My business was broken into, strange events every day and night for years. My ex was coached by his attorney, who was in cahoots with my attorney, to do every evil act and vexatious litigation possible to strip me of my reputation, money, and resources. My marriage lasted 1.5 years, and my divorce took 10 years, 3 judges, multiple attorneys, and I lost 3 houses and 4 cars and almost my life and children. Meanwhile, I encountered a series of quote-unquote friends that always seemed to be part of the courthouse: covens, government, military, nuclear plants, Masons. They were always spying and keeping tabs on me. I always dated creeps that were associated to those factions that somehow contacted me first. Every time one of them helped me or refused to persecute me, they would be fired or found, quote-unquote, not fit for duty and retired. I cannot even count the ways they destroyed my reputation or property. Eventually, I lost everything. I had to move out of town. I lost over 10 years in heavy targeting, over $3 million in fees and assets. The targeting eventually switched to street harassment, helicopters, and the usual once I broke up with this Mason jerk. The next one was a Mason and a warlock. The next one was part of another cult, and so forth. There are too many events to mention, but I realize this technology has always been around. They can spy and unalive anyone with it. We have some hidden protection somehow, and karma has been my best protector. They all got what they deserved every time they came at me. They hurt me. They died. Got imprisoned. It's been a fascinating journey, a trail of blood and tears. I'm an atheist, but I'm convinced that this is a very dark and demonic. They, multiple of these creeps, kept saying over and over, quote, "If you don't unalive yourself, I will do it," unquote. So, our life, our soul must be very important to them. I might do a separate part with more details. It's big. They started targeting the next generation. But this is my life story in a nutshell. Love you for everything that you are doing for humanity. Love, live, and peace. Well, thank you so much for that testimony. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to know what happened to you as young as 10 years old. It's heartbreaking to know that your good family was targeted, approached to participate, and when they didn't, they were tormented. It's even more alarming to know that pretty much every man that you came in contact with was evil, a psychopath, a sociopath, placed in your way. And I'm so sorry to hear how much you lost. I mean, people have said to me, like, how could she be a target if she's got a $500,000 home? Well, I know targets like you and others who had $1 million homes, multiple businesses. You know, people have varying educations, varying family histories. Some people work a lot, and a lot of people are very, very successful. And of course, it depends on your age, because the older you are, the more you accumulate over time, right? So obviously, you're very educated. You're in the medical profession. And it's heartbreaking to know that you were poisoned in your dorm room while everyone is away during Thanksgiving break, that your bike was stolen. And everything that you're describing, you know, in hindsight, perhaps maybe we were all targeted from birth. It's really my belief that we're followed. And as you mentioned, that there was a beginning when, looking back, you couldn't really put together that the events that were taking place were actually gang stalking events. And then you had a good start. While you were working, you had a good career start. Except that you took this one job and your boss was just plain evil, and then introduced you to your ex, who was another devil in and of himself. But it's interesting that you mentioned that they left you alone for a little while. And I feel that that happens. They actually want you to be successful at some point. It's very sadistic. They want you to gather information. They want you to earn a living at some point. They want you to become wealthy at one point. Why? Because they set it up to take it all away from you. It's very sick. It's very depraved. It's disgusting. And the fact that you mentioned twice that these creeps kept saying over and over, if you don't unalive yourself, if you don't kill yourself, I will do it. These were the exact words. And mind you, folks, I want you to know that I received this January 26th. And this is exactly what that person in the news, that man who was targeting his military wife, that video was over a year ago. So this seems to be something that these malignant narcissists say to threaten, to scare, to harass somebody so that they don't leave them. This is the way they respond when you divorce them, when you separate from them, when you don't want them anymore. So anyway, I am looking forward to your update on this. And yes, it's very upsetting to know that this may be going on to the next generation. That the next generation will be inheriting these problems if they're not taken care of now. But thank you again for this riveting testimony. And please leave a comment down below. And I look forward to talking to you in the next video.